Absalom had been killed by who? Yes, by a man by the name of Joab, and also his armor bearers. They played a role in that as well. There was a gentleman who wanted to take a message to the king. What was his name? Does anybody remember? Yes, Ahimaaz wanted to take the message of Absalom's death to the king, and Joab did not want him to do that. Why? Why didn't Joab want Ahimaaz to take the message to the king? He allowed another man to do it. Why didn't he want Ahimaaz to do it? Okay, yes, Ahimaaz was the son of the high priest, whereas Cushai, some think he was just a Cushite, was more of a servant to Joab. So, if David reacted negatively, if something happened that he wanted to, do harm to the messenger, at least it would not be the high priest's son. Plus, Cushai would have had less investment, would he not, in telling the news. True or false? For the nation of Israel, the death of Absalom was good news. Oh, it was great news, guys. For Israel, it was great news. Okay? And it should have been great news. Okay? They had won victory over who? They had won victory over an enemy. They had won victory over a person who rebelled against the king. It was good news. The only one it was not good news to was who? David. And that's because it was who? His son Absalom. When David received the news, what does the Bible say he did? He went up to a chamber over the gate and he wept and he cried out, "Oh, Absalom, Absalom, my son Absalom, would God that I had died for thee, O Absalom, my son, my son." That's where we ended the text last week, and now we enter into chapter 19. I divided this chapter into 5 sections. I've entitled it, The Rebuke of David and the Reluctance of Judah. The Rebuke of David and the Reluctance of Judah. 5 points. A father aches for his son, verses 1 through 4. A captain admonishes his commander, verses 5 through 8. People angered about the king, verses 9 and 10. Judah appeased over David, verses 11 through 15. Men approach the restored king, verses 16 through 18. So that's my outline, and we don't have a whole lot of time, so let's just fly through these, and we'll cover as many questions as we can. What was Joab told about David? Oh, yes, and it was told Joab, "Behold, the king weepeth and mourneth for Absalom." Ah, man. How did they know he was weeping and mourning? We talked about this a little bit last week. Remember, he had gone up over where? Over the gate of the city into a chamber, right? So any individual coming back into the city of Mahanaim would have heard the weeping of the king. Okay? They would have heard him crying out for his son. And so upon hearing that, are they concerned? Yes. And notice what the text says. And it was told Joab. What position does Joab hold in the kingdom? Yes, he is the captain of David's forces. Folks, here's a good lesson. At least they went to the right person to complain. Didn't they? Okay? If anybody can approach the king, if anybody can talk to the king about what's going on and his being upset, it ought to be who? Joab. He's the leader. He's the commander of the forces. So at least they told the right individual by telling Joab. And the blank that day was turned into blank unto all the people. And the victory that day was turned into mourning for all the people. Folks, the day of victory should be a time of what? Yeah, it ought to be a time of celebration, should it not? It ought to be a time when there are parties in the streets. When David came back from killing Goliath, what transpired? But all the people met him, did they not? And the women met him with their timbrels and their dancing and crying out, David has slain his thousands. David has slain his 10,000s and Saul his thousands. And there was just partying, but not here on this particular occasion. I wrote down there is sadness, there's confusion, there's anger, there's murmuring. Isn't there? A totally different day than it ought to have been. Okay? Why was the victory turned into mourning? Yes, for the people heard say how the king was grieved for his son. News travels fast, doesn't it? News travels fast, and soon it was spread throughout the kingdom. The king is upset, and that's not good for the kingdom, is it? I looked up that little word. It says grieve for his son. Here's a question. Shouldn't that have been the normal reaction of David? Who is David? He's the father. This is his who? This is his son. His son is dead. So, here's your son who has died. Wouldn't it just be the normal reaction for a father to grieve for his son? And yet, we're looking at David right now, and we're sure not looking at him through rose-colored glasses, are we? See, here's the lesson, folks. There are positions that we occupy in life that demand from us more than the normal. Okay? More than the normal. And this was true of David on this particular day. Who is he? He's not just the father of Absalom. He's also what? He is the king of Israel, who has just won a victory over somebody who has driven him from the holy city. Okay? And yet, he acts like there is no victory. Okay? Folks, there are some positions wherein you can't act normal in those positions. Okay? And this is one of those times. David is commander. He has another responsibility other than just to Absalom. He has a responsibility to the entire kingdom, and he needed to fulfill that responsibility. And he was what? He was shirking it, wasn't he? He was shirking that obligation. There you go. Separate your personal life from duty. And that's not always easy to do, is it? It's just not always easy. How did the people return to the city that day? I love that word, okay? Especially in the King James Version. And the people get them by stealth that day into the city. By stealth. You know, didn't know a thing about stealth bombers, but they knew about the word stealth. What does that little word stealth mean? Yeah, if you look up the definition of the word stealth, it means to thieve, to rob, to carry away. That's an interesting definition, isn't it? What it means is to steal away. Okay, to steal away, to be secret, to be clandestine. You know, a thief comes into your home, and what does he do? He grabs something, and he what? Runs away as quietly as he possibly can. Okay? What's that? Yes, it's sneaky. But these individuals, folks, they had to go as quietly as they possibly can into their city. Okay? No victory, no joy, no celebration. Just as quietly as you can go back home. That's exactly what Israel did. What did the people resemble as they returned to the city? It says, as people being ashamed, steal away when they what? Flee in battle. Okay? You're starting to get whooped in battle. What do? You take off running just as fast as you can. Okay? And that's what these individuals were doing. They were getting back to their house as quietly and as quickly as they possibly could. not a sound of victory. What did David, the king, do and say? And the king covered his face, and the king cried with a loud voice, "Oh, my son Absalom! Oh, Absalom, my son, my son!" And I'm certain there's still some individuals who are still just heartbroken for David. Poor David. Okay? Folks, there's a higher obligation that he's got, and he's not fulfilling it. I put down here, for some reason, the king either did not see or was not concerned about the reaction of the people to his grief. We often let I become more important than we. Leaders, however, do not have that luxury. Okay? You don't have that luxury. And it's something we really need to train individuals who become leaders. Okay? When you step into a leadership position, whether you like it, whether you don't like it, it's different, isn't it? Okay? And it was different for David on this particular occasion. True or false? Joab was fearful to approach the king. False. The Bible says, and Joab came into the house of the king and said, "Who is Joab?" Don't tell me what you just told me, because I'm not looking for that answer. I know he's the commander. Who else is Joab? Folks, he is the dude who murdered Absalom, isn't he? He's the one who killed him. Yeah. Shot 3 darts in his heart. Okay? Now, had he done that in violation of David's will? Yeah. Yeah. He'd done it in violation. Just think, if everything had gone perfectly, right? They won the victory. Absalom's dead. David rejoices. He rejoices with his troops. There's a big celebration. Well, guess what? When Joab gets home, guess where he doesn't want to go? He don't want to go to David's house. Okay? Because that's going to be the first man David deals with after the party. Right? But the situation in Israel has totally reversed itself, has it not? It's not a time of celebration. David is in weeping. David is in mourning. And David needs what? He needs a good correction. And guess what? I, Joab, am just the man to do it. I get right back into the presence of the king, and guess what? We won't have anything to say about me and what I've done. We'll talk about what David is saying and what David has done. Man, you take advantage of your opportunities, don't you? And Joab didn't hesitate to do that. It's unbelievable. Whose faces had David shamed that day? Yes, thou hast shamed this day the faces of all thy servants. Wow. Remember it says, as people fleeing from a battle. That's how shamed they were by what had transpired. Okay? Who had David's servants saved that day? I wrote down 5 groups, right? Number 1, who? David. Number 2, his sons' lives. Number 3, his daughters' lives. Number 4, his wives' lives. Number 5, the wives of his concubines. Folks, Joab goes in and reminds him real quickly, David, what we've done today has saved you and all your family's life. Every one of you. You see, if Absalom had continued on the throne, and if David had been slain in battle, what could Absalom have easily done? And it's been done numerous times after battle. You kill the previous king's family. You just get rid of them. Okay? Any threat to your new kingdom, you do away with. And family is a threat, isn't it? A huge threat. And if you don't take care of them, they can cause you a huge amount of trouble. Joab accused David of loving whom and hating whom? Yes, thou lovest thine enemies and hatest thou who? Thy friends. This is one of those actions speak louder than words evaluation. If David had been asked, do you love Israel because they won the victory, what would David have said? Oh yeah. But folks, he wasn't acting it, was he? He acted like he loved Absalom a lot more than he loved Israel. Who did David refuse to regard that day? Yes, for thou hast declared this day that thou regardest neither princes nor servants. That little word regardest. To front, to stand out boldly opposite, to announce, to tell, to make known, to declare, to announce, to proclaim. What probably happened? David gets news that there's the death of his son, right? And I don't know that he just went out and made a big public announcement, okay, stating, I don't want to hear anybody, I don't want to see anybody today, everybody just leave me alone. All he had to do was tell what? Just tell a servant, right? And anybody who came to David, guess what they were told? Nope. David said he's not taking any appointments today. David's not hearing it. Well, I'm a prince in Israel. He's told me he's not taking any visitors today. Nobody. So he just shut down anybody that might need to talk to him. Let me ask you something. After major victories on the battlefield, are there things that need to be talked about relative to the king? Yes. Folks, there's individuals who want to see him. There's individuals who want to talk to him. He had 3 commanders, did he not? Not just Joab. He had 2 other commanders as well. I'm not talking to anybody today. He just shut them all down. Unreal. What perception did Joab have about David that day? What is it? What perception did Joab have about David that day? He says this, for this I perceive. Can you believe that? That if Absalom had lived and all we had died this day, then it had pleased thee well. Ooh-wee. That's potent. And guess what? It probably wasn't far from the truth. Did you know that? If they'd lost the battle and Absalom had still been living, guess what? David would have been okay with that. You know that? They're perfectly fine. What are you going to say?
A proud father that his son was successful.
Oh yeah, at his own overthrow. Yeah, absolutely. Unreal. Guys, we can develop the wrong mindset about things, can't we? You know? We can love the wrong things. And we can hate the wrong things if we're not careful. And David was right there at that point over his son. Okay? I perceive that you love him more than what? More than you love us. Well, you know the justification, don't you? Well, that's his son. That was his evil son. That was his rebellious son. And you're going to love him more than the people who saved your family and your life today? Yep, that's what it seems like. And if we had lost and he had won, you'd have rejoiced over that? Seems like it. Is Joab taking advantage of a situation? Oh, yes. And he's telling some pretty strong truths to David on this particular occasion. What did Joab urge David to do? Yes, speak comfortably unto thy servants. Now therefore arise, go forth, and speak comfortably unto thy servants. Anybody look up the word comfortably? Nobody. See, if I don't put it in the notes, you don't do it. What in the world does he mean? Go out there and speak comfortably to them. Okay? The word comfortably is defined as this, the heart. Isn't that something? The heart. Used widely for the feelings, the will, and even the intellect. Brown Driver and Briggs says it refers to the inner man, the mind, the will, the heart, the understanding. It was a time for David to go out and have a heart-to-heart with who? With his servants. Folks, it was a time to show them honor. It was a time to show them respect. It was a time to show them gratitude. It was a time to show them that I love you as a commander of an army who's been victorious. And he should do it from what? Do it from the heart. Speak comfortably to thy people. Be real, be genuine, be sincere, be honest about what's happened here. And you tell these individuals that you're glad that they've won the victory. And let it come from where? Let it come from the heart, David. What two things did Joab say would happen if David did not follow the instructions? Number one, anybody can talk, you know. We'll just stand here all day if you don't. Not one of the people would tarry with him that night. That's the first thing. The second thing, this would be worse than all the evil that he had suffered from his youth till now. Man, had David suffered a lot? I just wrote down 4 things. He suffered at the hands of Saul when he had to flee in the wilderness. Number 2, he suffered when he sinned with Bathsheba. Did he not? Well, he suffered a bunch because of that. He suffered war with his enemies. And he'd already suffered the rebellion of a son against him. And Joab says, if you don't go out there, if you don't make this right, the people will not stand with you, and it will be worse than anything that you have suffered up to this point. Ooh-wee. I don't know about you. I wouldn't want no more suffering. If I were David, would you? Oh, Joab's good with words, isn't he? Some believe that Joab was right in confronting the king, but they believe that his manner of moving the king to action was heartless and despicable. It must be remembered that it was Joab who killed Absalom. He took advantage of a distraught man too. He made sure he established the boundaries in the conversation, did he not? Guess what's never brought up? That's right. That's never brought up, is it? Okay? Man. You know, had I been David, first thing I'd done, I'd say, who are you have the right to come in here and talk to me? You disobeyed my orders. You killed my son, and I told you not to. You can just get out of my office. In fact, there's a gallows out there for you. Okay? But Joab, he took advantage of the situation. True or false? David followed the counsel of Joab. True. For the king arose and sat in the gate. I put this down. It would be interesting to feel David's emotions right now. Wouldn't it? It'd be interesting to feel David's emotions.
The actual answer to this is false, correct?
False, yes. Yes, as far as the question is concerned. I don't even think did he refuse to follow? No, he didn't. He followed the counsel. I put down here his son was dead and he was deeply upset. Folks, that hasn't changed. Okay? His commander had disobeyed his order about his son. The commander who killed his son confronted him about his display of grief. Now he had to muster the strength to, from the heart, talk to his who? Talk to his soldiers. You think that's a tough job? Folks, the next time you wake up with a sniffle and you don't want to come to service, you think about David and what he had to do. You know what? I was in a meeting over at Bay, Arkansas, and I woke up on a Monday, and you talking about miserable. This kid was miserable. I had a sinus infection that would not stop. Couldn't get into the doctor for a couple of days. All I had on tap was hydrocodone. That's all I had. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of that meeting, old Vic was preaching on half a hydrocodone every night. Okay? I don't know what I said. Somebody said that's the best meeting you've ever preached. But folks, the point, there's times when your position means, guess what you have to do? You've got to rise up above your circumstances and your situations. Doesn't matter how you feel. Doesn't matter, your emotional state at the time. Okay? People sometimes act like preachers don't have anything going on in their lives. Let me tell you something. I got a bunch of stuff going in my life that nobody knows about. I promise you that. If I told you, you'd be shocked. But guess what you can't do? You can't go around telling everybody that and acting like that and making it let that be an excuse for why I can't do my job. I can't do that. Okay? You've got to do what your position requires. Finally, David did that. And it's not, and what I'm trying to get across, it's not easy. Okay? When David had to go out there and address the troops, it wasn't easy, but you have to do it. Okay? Just part of the job to do it. True or false? No one would come out when they heard David was sitting at the gate. That's false. And they told all the people, saying, Behold, the king doth sit at the gate. And all the people came before the king, for Israel had fled every man to his tent. Folks, I want you to listen. All the people came before the who? Came before the king. All of them. Was Joab right that if David had continued in that state that it would have been a bad situation? Oh yeah, it had been bad. But the minute David did what he was supposed to do, guess what? The people immediately rallied to his side, didn't they? The king's in the gate. They all go out to meet the king. After David's victory, what arose among the people? Yes. And all the people were at strife throughout all the tribes of Israel. Folks, there had been some time that had passed between this verse and the previous verse. Okay? It wasn't because David was sitting in the gate and giving a good heart-to-heart talk to his armies. All that was over. And now the kingdom should have been what? It should have been going back to normal, shouldn't it? And guess what? It wasn't. Now there was strife among the people. That little word strife means to quarrel, to argue. There was infighting going on among all of Israel. Over who? Over David. There's some on David's side, and there are some who are what? Not on David's side. Okay? Not on. Where was David right now? Where? Well, yes and no. He probably finally got down off the gate and everything. But what city was he in? He was in Mahanaim. Folks, Mahanaim is on the trans side of is in the Transjordan region. Okay, it is across the Jordan from the city of Jerusalem. Where should he have been? He should have been in Jerusalem, but he ain't. That ain't good. When the king isn't in the capital city, it's not good. Okay? And the reason he wasn't there is because there was infighting among who? Infighting among the Israelites. Okay? What two things did those on his side say about him? Yes, the king saved us out of the hand of our enemies. And yes, he delivered us from the hand of the Philistines. Folks, David's a good guy. David's been on our side. He's been our protector. He's been our helper. He's been an unbelievable commander. He saved us from all of our enemies. But where was he? And now he has fled out of the land for Absalom. Oh, He's not even where he's supposed to be. Look what the king has done. And he's still not where? He's still not in Jerusalem. Why isn't he in Jerusalem? Since Absalom was dead, what questions did the people raise? Yes. Now therefore, why speak ye not a word of bringing the king back? Man, you would have thought that had been the top priority, wouldn't you? Get David back to Jerusalem. Let me ask you something. Did David have a lot of difficulties in his reign? Yeah. Folks, the first 7.5 years of his reign, he was reigning over a divided kingdom, was he not? He was reigning in Hebron, not in the city of Jerusalem. Finally, they worked that little problem out, and not too many years later, guess what happens? Now there's a rebellion, is there not? Well, the man is dead, and guess what? Part of Israel wants him back, part of Israel doesn't want him back. And there's strife and there's wrangling in the kingdom. Is there going to be another uprising before David is finally done? I guess you'll have to wait and see. Who did David send to the elders of Judah? He sent Zadok and Abiathar. Who are they? The priests, the high priests. Okay, where were they? Where were those men? Where did David put those men? Where had they been all this time? Yeah, they're in the city of Jerusalem, folks. David's still in Mahanaim, but he's communicating with them. So he sends word to these two priests, and he says, I need you to give some folks some messages. What question did David want them to pose to the elders? Yes. Why are you the last to bring the king back to his house? Folks, these are the elders of who? Judah. I want to ask something. From whose lineage is David? Judah. This is weird, isn't it? Everybody in Israel wants David back except who? Judah. And that's his who? That's his kinfolk. That's weird. You know what? You would think it would be the opposite, wouldn't you? His own kin would want him back, and everybody else would not want him to be the king. So he has to send messengers to Judah. Why are you the last to bring the king back to his house? That'd be a good question, right? In other words, why are you the ones preventing me from coming back? There might be two reasons. Has anybody really thought about it? Why would Judah not want David back? Yes, it could be that many of the people in Judah had been on the side of who? On the side of Absalom. Okay? And therefore, they were fearful to bring David back, thinking there might be some retaliation if they did bring him back. Second reason, they didn't like the way David had responded to the death of Absalom. That's not the way a who responds. That's not the way a king responds. Okay? And folks, the moment that people see weaknesses and the moment that people see that you may not really be fit for the job, guess what? We don't want you back in this particular position. The interesting thing is, the Bible doesn't tell us why Judah didn't want David. We'll never know that. Or at least not in this life we won't, because the Bible just doesn't say. What was something that really confused David about Judah's reluctance to bring him back? That's question 26. Yeah, you're my brethren. Isn't that what he says? You're my brethren. You're my bones and my flesh. Wherefore are you the last to bring me back to Jerusalem? Wow. What did Jesus say on one occasion? Anybody know about Jesus and family? A prophet is not without honor, save in his own country and in his own house. It's true, isn't it? You know? Get the old preacher, let him go out to a few gospel meetings, and everybody loves him. Go back and talk to his home folk. We ain't talking about the same person. Right? Then you go talk to his wife. He sure ain't talking about the same person. But it's just the case. It's just true, isn't it? You know? And so here David is, his own family, his own kinsmen, just despise him and refuse to let him back to Jerusalem. But now notice what David does. What does Zadok and Abiathar, what do they to say to Amasa? Wait a minute, let's stop. Who is Amasa? Ah, yes. He was put in command of Absalom's forces, was he not? This is the first time we ever have even read of Amasa. Well, now the battle's over. David sends to the city and he tells the high priest to tell Amasa what? What's he going to make him? Thou art bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. God do so to me and more also. If thou be not captain of the host before me continually, listen to him, in the room of Joab. Guess what he just told him? Joab's gone. Folks, you don't think what Joab did and what Joab said to David didn't tick David? It ticked him. And guess what now? Joab just got fired. Didn't he? If you let me back in, guess who? Joab's gone. And I'm going to put Amasa, who was the person that was put in charge under Absalom, as the captain of the forces. Oh, David's using a little diplomacy of his own. True or false? The king returned. True? One more question and we'll stop. Who was the first person to meet him when he got to the River Jordan? Shimei. That good old boy. We'll talk about Shimei next week. Man.